Hey kiddos, today we're going to start off with an interesting look at one of the earliest theoretical models that helped explain urban settings. We're going to do so in Minecraft. Um, I've kind of thrown together a little world here. We got a few of our good friends and ed class. Hey Rudy, how you doing, Rudy? Um, Companions. Let's get started though. Okay, so we're just going to walk on over and kind of take a tour of a city that I have laid out. And we're pretty friendly here, so we even let pigs be in our city. Um, on your way, you're going to notice some different colors of the ground, and I'll explain that at the end. So this first area, this black dirt here is supposed to represent pavement, like an interstate coming on into the city. And we kind of just have a open air area here. We don't see much going on, but we can see the city off in the front. So the first area we come into is just row after row of pretty much the same type of house. So this area is where we would consider to be suburbia. We see a lot of the same style of house. A lot of more upper class people live out here. We see it kind of toward these more open air area because property's a little bit cheaper out here, so you can build a bigger, nicer home, but you don't have to pay as much taxes, things like that. So after we transition from that, these little wooden blocks represent lower income housing. This zone is what some might call the inner city now, even though that's sort of not really the best way to describe it. When this model was created, it was actually called the working man's district, and that'll become pretty obvious here in a minute why that was. So we move into this red zone. We kind of see a transition from these wooden blocks to I've kind of used these little brick buildings to represent factories, and so this zone of the city we see a lot more of these. This is the industrial area. We kind of move away from residential. Not many people live here because you don't want to live next to a factory, especially if you have a family. And there's a little bit more production focus in this area. We're not really looking at like little businesses and things like that. We're looking at mostly factory work. So coming back to our interstate here, we move right into the city center. So this is more like what we usually think of when we think of the city, these tall buildings, skyscrapers all over the place. And this is what the developers of this model called the central business district. So this area houses almost all the commerce for the city. All the big banks and businesses are here, and they have their big fancy buildings. And this is really the heart of the city in this model. So we can see here, looking out, it's sort of kind of in a ring around this central business district. And we'll just kind of zoom up here, and we can see this golden area. That's the CBD. Okay. Moving out here, that industrial area is just called the factory zone in this model. We have this short red area where we see some factories over there, we see some houses. That's called the transition zone, and some of the cheapest housing in the city, according to this model, is in that area. Then we move out into that working class zone to be the most inclusive with our language with it. This area is primarily single family homes, or multiple family homes, and some single workers. Then we're going on out into suburbia, and this is called the residential zone in the original model, but now we call it more the high end residential housing that we would see in the suburbs. And then this small yellow zone on the outside is called the commuter zone. It's an area where some highfalutin businessmen might build their house and they have really cheap property out here, so they have like little mansions and things like that, and they have to commute all the way into that city center. So that's kind of what this looks like. We're gonna talk a little bit about it now. I'm just gonna perch on top of this skyscraper here. So looking over the city, we can see that sort of ring model, and this model was created by a man named Ernest Burgess in 1925, and it was he took a human ecologist approach. So what we mean by that is he applied ecology science to humans. So we thought of us as a system, like plants or animals around us. We have all these parts, and we come together and make a whole. And the city that he specifically studied was Chicago. So this actually applies very well to Chicago. If you want to pause the video and kind of just Google what Chicago looks like, you'll see sort of like a half slice of this. You'll see the sort of suburbs on the left. You'll see the working class areas and those lower income groups, and then a lot of old factory zones. And then just to the right of the central business district is Lake Michigan. So this is almost Chicago is almost a perfect example of this model. Later on, people kind of built off this model because they didn't think it was so great. So we see this empty space over here. There's a model that was developed by a man named Homer Hoyt called the multiple nuclei model. Oh, I apologize, that wasn't Homer Hoyt. That was someone else. Homer Hoyt had the section model. So this multiple nuclei model has outlying business districts. So we're just gonna put in a new neighborhood out here. We slap in a big new tower because a lot of these people here, they wanted to have a closer business district. They didn't want to have to drive clear into the city center just to get their basic goods and services. So this tower represents an outlying business district. So that model, the multiple nuclei model, would have in a bigger city, kind of have one over there off in the distance, this one, that one, and then it could in bigger cities like LA or Shanghai or some of those big sprawling cities, there could be a lot of these. So it's pretty obvious that this isn't a perfect model. I'm sure we can all brainstorm ideas at the beginning of class of why it's limited, but some other people have said that the biggest problems are, first of all, it really only describes Chicago. It really only describes a generic Midwest American city. It doesn't really take into play different types of suburbs. There are suburbs that aren't just residential. It also, if you notice, this is just a big flat land area, and it works really well in big flat land areas, but not everywhere is flat. There are plenty of places around the world that have terrain, and so the multiple nuclei model kind of explains those areas a little bit better. And the other thing is that it really misses out on a lot of issues like gentrification, urbanization, and globalization that we'll get into with some of the later models. So, moving on, beyond this city, we're going to kind of talk about developing our own model. So tomorrow in class, we're going to draw our own ways that we would like to plan a city using different, we're going to kind of get outside of the box, we're going to zone the city. So if this horse will get out of my way, this is the little village that I made. It's a really smaller version of the city, and we have a way different scale, obviously. But I just kind of included some things that were important to me. So we're going to fly up above and look at different colors. So the water fountain is zoned as sort of a park area. I kind of put it in there as a park. Over here on this light blue, it means the same as the other city. We kind of have a residential area, so that's a house that someone would live in. And then we have two buildings here that we can see are zoned as industrial, but it's a kind of different type of industry. I kind of went more for like logging and cooking and things like that, service industry. And then finally, on the right, something that other city really missed out on, I think, is some agriculture. So I included a little bit of a garden with a windmill. So tomorrow, just kind of think before class about what you uh, would like your city to be like, and come with some ideas on how to draw out your own model. And then as we move forward, we'll learn about how other people have accepted or rejected this central business district concentric zone model, and how it looks different around the world. Okay, thank you, and see you tomorrow.